Yeah, so just sweet, awesome interview. I really love everything that's been happening lately. So, posting to Facebook and Instagram, I know in a way that sort of teases out some of the experts that are with us, some of the real, folks have been involved in the discourse of food sovereignty, food security, nutrition sciences, public health. I really everything that I do, what I'm asking for is the opportunity to be able to engage in conversations, a conversation, and to talk about food, nutrition, security, sovereignty, all of these things, incredibly valuable and extremely important conversations. And so, this is my sort of effort or opportunity to be able to spend time with experts, share some of my ideas, listen to some of theirs, the questions, comments, debates, uh, uh, um, uh, opposing views. I think from this one, we could identify that yeah, there is enrichment in difference of opinion. Good things happen when we have conversations, and these need to happen more often than not. So, I really appreciate the time that Lauren was able to spend with me and with us, for her being willing to have the conversation recorded so that I could share, so that we could all benefit from this conversation. Really, really amazing things to happen. So, if you're somebody who wants to reach out, have a conversation, hopefully hit record. We don't have to. These conversations are super important and very, very valuable. So, yeah, just reach out and we'll make it happen. Really, really thankful for to Lauren for allowing this to happen, bringing some really, really valid and incredible questions, and I hope I answered those well. So, we had a little preamble there before we actually hit record. So, but I think we did a good job just kind of jumping right into it. So here you go. Have fun. Um, that's so good. Okay. Um, yeah. So to your second question, I guess, where do I, how do I do my research? Where do I get these resources? How come I am presenting myself as being unbiased, I guess? um, it's so, uh, my main job was teaching about medicine for years, and I was presenting medicine as a legitimate therapy to physicians and pharmacists, because that's generally where the barrier is had when we're looking at obtaining or accessing indigenous healthcare via medicine. The barrier was at the physician or at the pharmacist, and it was because they don't understand plant mechanism, plant chemistry, and so usually at that level, the physician is instructed to withdraw therapy or withdraw treatment because of we don't know about contraindications and stuff like that. So I spend most of my time understanding plant mechanism. So every plant's going to have like 100, 250 different chemical constituents that all have a physiological function or effect. And it was my job to understand what each of those were to get an understanding of what this plant is doing biologically everywhere, follow every pathway, go down every rabbit hole to know exactly what this plant is doing, and then share that with physicians and pharmacists, so that we can identify a way that we could work together. And it was super fun. I did that for years. I had to, of course, I'd pull up some plant chemical and I would read, the first dozen articles would take me months to understand because of the biology, the physiology that I'm not trained in. I had to train myself to be able to know what I was reading, what all these freaking words were. Like, what is an AMPK? What are kinases? What is uh mTOR? What is all this, like, what does all these letters and numbers mean? And different kinds of inflammation and their roles and yada. So, that's where kind of like my background of physiology, I guess, comes from. Was learning from plants, what plants do, as a means to justify their use in a clinical setting. And but recently, well, say maybe in the last 5, 6 years or so, kind of really switching my focus, like increasing access to medicine is great, but that's not going to be responsible for our opportunity to be able to heal from chronic disease epidemic, accelerated aging, because it doesn't work for everybody. It, like a diabetes medicine is not going to work in the presence of insults by way of, like carbohydrates. If you're pouring carbohydrates down your neck, you're not going to be able to recover from diabetes. Doesn't matter what amount of medicine that you're having. So I realized just in my research after a failed graduate thesis, I guess, that in order to increase our access to health, the medicine is not going to help. It's not an option, because in order for medicine to be valid for a physician, there needs to be randomized controlled trials, and that's never going to happen. And so we can't utilize this pathway. So I started looking for, how else can we access health? Because there's other cultural components that are necessary for health, like fasting, sweat lodge or sauna therapy, cryotherapy with the cold, and exercise, culturally appropriate exercise. And all of that was great until I came across nutrition, to understand nutrition's role in our ability to be happy and healthy, our ability to heal and prevent disease. There was just nothing can hold a candle to nutrition. Like everybody and everything just bends the knee. It is by far the most influential dictator of the health of the individual. And so I said, okay, now I really have to understand nutrition. And where do we as a species, how is our biology, where do we get nutrition from? And so really simple comparative anatomy and physiology, looking into archaeology and anthropology, I guess, utilizing as many forms of evidence that I can to be able to understand what our body is designed to derive nutrients from. And the answer for years was, or for maybe like the first, probably for me, within the first few months of researching this 6 years ago, it was an understanding already that we are in the bodies of an obligate hypercarnivore, and we're designed to derive almost all of the nutrients that we get from animals. And I didn't like that. And so the reason why I'm presenting this, the reason why these Facebook posts are presented like in a controversial way, my YouTube videos, whatever, is because I've been spending the past 6 years challenging the snot out of this idea, trying to poke as many holes in it as I could. Then you see like on Joe Rogan, the carnivore doctor, Baker, Sean Baker. And then you see the psychologist fella, real abrasive guy, famous dude, Jordan Peterson was on Joe Rogan, and all of this stuff started to become super common. That if these people, physicians and psychiatrists or whatever, eating exclusively meat, it started to enter into like a really public space. And I had already spent like a year or two criticizing it to my utmost potential, and it didn't matter what I did, it was always staring at me in the face. There was no holes that I could poke in this idea for years. And I've asked all of the same questions that everybody is asking me, like, what about fiber for the microbiome? What about the molars in your mouth? And what about this and that and this and that and that and this? And so the research that I've done to come to these conclusions was actually just a consequence of years of trying to criticize this idea, because I couldn't believe it. And now we're here. That ship is still in front of my face, and I could look in any other which direction, any other style of eating, and really easily be able to understand and determine that carbohydrates, vegetable seed oils, and any amount of plant matter that is utilized as a food source, there's consequences too. Um, and and so, yeah, just kind of like in a nutshell, just kind of realizing that most of the problems that we have today, you just kind of take the intake that somebody ingests 4.5 to 5 pounds of food every day. Most of that is insulting. You add medicine plants on top of that, and sometimes they make things work, and that's why they don't always work for everybody. So it's kind of like at this point where, you know, if I'm able to identify that the insults that drive chronic disease and accelerated aging are the inappropriate use of plant foods, then I should be sharing this. I feel responsible for this, and so probably publicly, I guess, though it's been in my community work for the better part of 5 years. Just using our social media now as a platform to just my responsibilities to people, just over the years of experiences of what happens when we eliminate plant foods from our diet, what happens to the health of that individual, it's just overwhelming. And now is just a time for everybody to have an opportunity to engage in and understand this way of eating and this opportunity to be able to heal. But yeah, my sources are absolutely everywhere because I've been trying to poke holes in this idea. I've approached it with the most criticism that I've applied to anything has been applied to these ideas. And so I understand when everybody's coming at me, I understand all of the questions and the issues. And so it's fun, being able to clarify some of these points. Uh, but yeah, freaking rambling now because I kind of forget what exactly you said.
So what about the molars, Job? You brought those up. What about the molars? You tell me. It sounds like you already have an answer to that question, so that's what I'm gonna ask.
Okay, yeah. So this one, what about molars and our jaw moves side to side? So this one is really fun because um one of the things that we need to do is we need to look at our whole body. We need to look at everything and the totality of the evidence. And so you could pick apart things like, let's take color. We could see in color, and we have molars. So we have molars that are designed to grind nuts and fruits and plant foods, and our incisors, our canines, are really small. Interestingly, you look at great apes and they got massive canines. But anyways, my main sort of position about molars and oral hygiene in general is that if there are no natural selection pressures, both negative and positive, against the or for our molars, they're not going to change. If there's nothing forcing these to change, like, okay, so the idea that we were once great apes and we evolved to be obligate hypercarnivores, wouldn't our face extend and our incisors grow and our molars disappear and our jaw become fixed like every other carnivore? And the answer to that is no, because there's been no pressures that are forcing that change to happen, because we don't hunt with our face. We've been hunting with sharp, pointy sticks and eating with forks and knives. So, and cooking our food. And so there's no reason why our molars would change from when we were consuming much more plant food. There's just been no selection pressures that this part of our body.
I'm just going to stop you right there.
Okay.
So when we were consuming more plant food, so you're saying that at some point evolutionarily, that is what humans or human-like predecessors were doing, was eating a bunch of plant food. Is that what you're saying?
Sure.
Okay, so why is it an issue now? That's what I want to know. If we had the selection pressures to develop the flat side-to-side molar jaw situation in the first place, then obviously that would have been evolutionarily beneficial to have at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And you were saying, yes, we would have consumed much more plant matter back in those millions of years ago or whatever. So
Mm-hmm. So obviously there had to have been lots of pressures against other systems and processes in our body, because our stomach acid went from, say, when we were eating lots of plants, if that is the case. I have such huge issues with these massive stretches in time, but let's take our stomach acidity went from every other herbivore is usually between 4 and 6. Carnivorous animals are usually between 2 and 3. Yet the stomach acidity of a human is between 1.5 and 2. We have the stomach acidity greater than that of carnivores. We have the stomach acidity of scavengers, which is designed to, the reason for it being that high or being this acidic, sorry, that low, is to deal with pathogens, because we are designed apparently to be eating animal products that have rotted. So our stomach acidity changed to not just carnivorous, to be that of a carnivorous stomach acidity, but that of scavengers. Our gut morphology completely changed. Our small intestine, that is designed to absorb nutrition from rich sources, animal products, grew over 70%. Our large intestine, that's designed to absorb foods or nutrition from poor nutrition sources like plants, shrunk because we don't need it. We lost the cecum, which is the giant fermentation vat that sits in the beginning of the large intestine. We didn't need that anymore. We didn't need the bacteria to break down the plant foods into something that is biologically appropriate. We didn't need that anymore. So now we have a little appendix, a little vestigial flap that does nearly nothing. Our fat cell size and shape, or our fat cell size and quantity changed to being from a herbivore that is many small fat cells to being more carnivore, which is very few but large fat cells.
He's my phone, not yours.
So there was a lot of things that changed. Our mouth didn't change, and our ability to see color didn't change, because there was no natural selection pressures, negative or positive, enforcing that change. And when you look at the totality of the evidence, you look at every other part of our body, so many pressures caused and influenced so many changes to cause us to, migrate from an herbivore to what we are now, an obligate hypercarnivore.
So just like walk me through a day and you're like, I know you said you just eat meat and fat, but like, what does your like breakfast, lunch, dinner situation look like? Like, what is on your actual plate?
So just I forgot to mention too, one of the things about this jaw and molar argument is that so the idea is that what a lot of people will present is that, hey, well, maybe we still have it because we're still meant to eat little bits of fruits and vegetables. Doesn't that make sense? And so one of the things that I wanted to say just that needs to be understood is that the consequence to eating carbohydrates and fiber from plant foods is literally the only thing that drives cavities. There's only 3 bacteria that can build inside of your mouth and cause cavitations. They eat carbohydrates or fiber and convert those into lactic acid that eats away at the enamel of your teeth until you have a cavity. And that is literally seriously only driven by carbohydrates. If you were to never have 1 gram of one carbohydrate ever for the rest of your life, you would never have a cavity. And so I've been having lots of fun with my dentist. He's the one that told me that. I mean, I already knew, but I asked him, and without even hesitation, I said, what would happen if I stop having carbohydrates? And in the same breath, he said, you'd never need to see a dentist. And so you kind of have to look at the consequences of engaging in carbohydrates and fiber and plants. They're not according to our biological design. And there's, some pretty severe consequences to that, of which I think we're seeing in the chronic disease epidemic that we're in now. But yeah, a day in the life. Honestly, it's like I go to my farm, a farm. There's a few around Peterborough, regenerative agriculture farms. Generally, everything is about $5-6 a pound, and from steaks and roasts and stews and bones and organs and ground beef. And I just kind of take my pick, let something thaw out, buzz it up in a pan, and that's it. Call it a day. I eat mostly ground beef, not gonna lie, because it's super easy, super fast. And I eat once between 1.5 to 2 pounds, depending on my activity level of meat and fat every day. And that's it. Just usually have once a day between, I don't know, 11 to 1 or something. I'll have my meal, and then that's it. Might have a couple snacks in the evening, like pick off somebody's uh whatever I cooked for dinner, steaks or chickens or fish or whatever, and I might kind of pick at everybody else's meal later. But as far as like meals go, I have like one a day. Yeah, between 1.5 to 2 pounds, and then that's it. It's real simple.
Okay, so here's the other thing that what it boils down to for me is because like I've been thinking about this literally since I saw like one of your first posts about like fiber or like vegetables being contraindicated to the human diet. I want to enjoy my life, Joe. I want to enjoy the food that I eat. And I'm not gonna lie, and I've accepted that. I literally accepted like way before we even figured on having this conversation in the first place. Even if Joe is absolutely 100% inarguably correct about what is like a biologically optimized human diet, I am not going to be eating that because I want to enjoy my life and I want to enjoy food and I like the way it tastes. And I'm not going to stop eating it because it could potentially cause some inflammatory chronic illness way off in the future, because there's so many people that I know that do eat fruits and vegetables and fiber that live a perfectly normal, healthy life without chronic illness and pain and stuff like that. So it's just like one of those cost benefit analyses for me where I'm like, no, I don't want to give up eating strawberries. No, I don't want to eat just ground beef on a plate without a fucking taco shell or veggies or cheese on it, because that seems like it would suck a lot of the enjoyability out of, culinary exploration in general. You know what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying.
So that's it. Like, even if I'm like 100% sold on all of the things that you're telling me, and I'm like, yes, Joe Pitawanakwat is 100% absolutely emphatically right about the fact that we should just be eating like meat and fat.
Mhm.
It ain't gonna happen. It's not gonna fucking happen. So yeah, like I hear where you're coming from. I
Mhm.
totally understand like the evidence that you're presenting, and like, you know what I mean? I get it that if we just ate liver, we would be so darn healthy and be getting all of our essential vitamins and minerals. But it ain't happening.
Yeah, so I like to kind of answer this question two different ways. So number one tends to be a little bit abrasive, but I think when we can understand the reason for carbohydrate addiction being rooted in an opportunity, rooted in escapism, the mental and emotional stresses and traumas that we have and go through every single day, hyperpalatable foods that taste really good, like carbohydrates, are a way to that we can escape from that. And so there is some really incredibly deep rooted carbohydrate addiction that we would be looking to manage. And so the first most abrasive thing that I could probably ever say is that an alcoholic will know that um, all of the benefits of removing alcohol from their life. They know it's a bad thing, they know it's destroying everything, but they can't imagine their life without it. Um, Also, I know and understand the art of culinary. I mean, I use, like, we have like 230 different species of plants that we teach about their medicinal purpose. This is also the herb and spice rack. So when we're cooking, these are utilized and incorporated within that. So as far as a flavor profiles go, we're able to accomplish a lot still. But and keeping the quantity of plants ingested to an absolute minimum, but maximizing flavor potential, right? But one of the things that I like to say too, though, is understanding carbohydrate addiction is really, really important. And also where the true therapy needs to occur. Generally, with carbohydrate addiction, that's one of the things that we're looking at is the mental and emotional stresses and traumas of every day. We utilize carbohydrates as a way to escape that. And so what needs to be addressed? Not the food. We need to learn how to manage our stresses and be able to deal with the traumas that we've dealt with or inherited. The other thing that I really like to say to this question, this idea, which is a really, really strong point, is that no one would ever, when you're driving through if you're walking through the forest and you see a moose and the moose is using its big fat lips and is eating all the bark and leaves off of trees, you would never, ever say to that moose, man, like, look at that. What a restrictive diet. It's just eating plants. That's all it eats is bark and a couple leaves here and there. Like, doesn't it know? Like, has it ever had a timbit before? You imagine the increase in the quality of life of this animal if it knew that there's so many other amazing things out there. Like, we should give it a steak. And like, we would never think that. You look at a moose eating twigs and you say, hey, look at that moose. It is eating according to its biological design. It is being an herbivore. This is a good day. And then when you're looking at yourself, we should extend ourselves the same courtesy. We're in the bodies of an obligate hypercarnivore. That is a reality, I guess. And to identify this as being restrictive or a problem is deflecting, I guess. There's bigger issues that we need to deal with, I think. And if we're deriving pleasure or all of the pleasure, and the most powerful escape tactic is food, then there's some bigger fish to fry, for want of a better term, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And like, as somebody who has a degree in sustainable food systems, it's like, what in your eyes would be a sustainable food system?
So this is actually
Actively feed the 9 billion people that we have. Like, what would you consider a sustainable, biologically optimized food system for human beings?
So this is good. This is so good. These amazing questions. Okay. So number one, I'm presenting the extreme. I'm telling everybody the extreme. This is real. It's a reality. There's no knock on that. It's for reals. But the reality of the chronic disease epidemic, accelerated aging, and all of these issues that we're trying to manage and deal and prevent, it's most important, I think, to that, not everybody, not even 0.5% of everybody who hears this will immediately adopt it and say and take it for gospel, and then that's it, and never eat plants again for the rest of their lives. There's not a lot of people are going to do that. Like he's mentioning, there's way too much enjoyment in so many other, in a variety of foods. It's impossible. So when I'm working with one-on-one, or when I'm working with a small group, our community work, like where I spend most of my time, is like take this extreme idea, and yeah, you could take it to the bank. Everything is going to be okay. But what I actually teach is utilizing this as a teacher to restrict carbohydrates, restrict fiber, of course, preferably to zero, because any amount of them are inappropriate. But restrict it. At least consider taking your 500 grams of carbohydrates every day and restricting that as much as you can. Most people are easily the next day able to get below 150, which according to nutritional research and is considered low carbohydrate. And restrict carbohydrates, eliminate vegetable oil, and like walk a couple times a week. That's it. That's all I say. That's going to be really responsible for reversing disease, preventing it in the future, slowing the accelerated aging. Those three things. That's it. Um, but also too, like, just knowing that that's not optimal, that is the best kind of situation that we could be putting ourselves in. um but for, the sustainability issue, everybody wants to look right at 9 billion people, and this is not sustainable. Interestingly, what I tell everybody, though, for reals, is the whole origin story, that I have no qualifications, or maybe shouldn't even really be speaking to whatsoever. But I think, and a lot of other people think too, what happens is, we survive on almost exclusively megafauna throughout the entire existence of our species and pre-hominid species. Uh, and when the megafauna go extinct, maybe because we ate them all, maybe because of a catastrophic event, they were gone. And when they were gone, we had to rely a lot more on plants. So we created the Eastern Agricultural Complex. We created agriculture. That agriculture was shared from place to place. We got corns and potatoes and every other nightshade. And the agricultural revolution, disease revolution as well, began. And so when you're looking at what our bodies have been created for, it's to eat megafauna. We survived almost exclusively on it through the entire existence of our species. That's only recently changed. And so when you tell somebody, this is our diet and our natural source of food is gone, there's no mammoths, the beavers are not the size of cars, and there's no woolly rhinos running around anymore. So what are we going to eat? And so you could hit the macronutrient profile and micronutrient density of an ancestrally consistent diet by utilizing the domesticated ruminant animals of today, so cows, sheeps, goats, whatever, and to be able to hit the macronutrient profile and micronutrient density of our ancestors who were eating megafauna. We can manipulate this to be able to access that food today. And there's good ways to do it and not so good ways to do it from the perspective of the environment. From the perspective of human health, if it's from an animal, it's going to be okay. But from the perspective of the environment, we have lots of issues with factory farming, conventionally raised animals, and I think most of those problems. I tell everybody to source out regenerative agriculture source meats all the time. I could get, there's farms all over Ontario, even in Thunder Bay. A woman got it in Kenora. She was able to find in Kenora, Ontario, like freaking 22 hours north of here. She found a regenerative agriculture farm and has been eating there exclusively. And has come off of all of her diabetes medication since. But in Thunder Bay, all over Ontario, Southern Ontario, there's some parts where there's no access to regenerative egg meat. And that, can be an issue, but, in a capitalistic society, we have the opportunity to everything that we buy is a vote that we make. And if we're voting on regenerative agriculture meats, if there's more people explaining the benefits of it, that this is literally the only place that you're supposed to be deriving nutrients from is from animals, and we're seeking out as this in the most responsible way, the demand for it is going to increase. And the amount of regenerative agriculture farms are going to have to increase with that. And we will have access to grass-fed, grass-finished, biologically appropriate foods, as well as rebuilding the soil and sequestering carbon throughout the whole process. And so utilizing this way of eating, I'm really, really confident in saying that on average for a year, one cow is going to be way more than enough animal product to sustain me for an entire year, and then some, and then a lot of some. And
Yeah, I understand that the way that an animal is consumed is also incredibly problematic in this food system. As in, people go to the grocery store, they get the one cut of meat that they like, wrapped up in their nice styrofoam package with the plastic wrap. And then they do that every week, right? They buy the one cut. the chicken breast or like the T-bone or the sirloin or the whatever the heck their preference is.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wants to eat organ meat and nobody wants to eat bone marrow and nobody wants to, you know what I mean, eat
Mm-hmm.
render the leaf fat from a cow so they have a nice pound of suet. Like these are not the things that people are doing anymore, and it's just like one of the biggest problems when it comes to looking at animal agriculture and how it can be done sustainably.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So one thing, not, and it's not even a correction, but it's like, um that's only here. Every other part of the world, the organs are the most highly prized part of an animal, and they're way more expensive. Marrow fat anywhere else in the world, or marrow bones, or soup bones, I guess, organ meats, glands, um are some of the most expensive things that you could ever look to purchase from an animal, because they're rare. The meat and fat of an animal is plenty, but it only has one liver. And so they're generally, and when you're looking at a global perspective, organ meats are the most sought after. Brains, everything, tongues, tails, um, yeah, spleens and hearts and all of this are the most important. From an indigenous perspective as well, these have always been the most important. It's what we're ripping out of the animal first. And in Cree communities, the kids are flying at a moose, reaching inside as soon as the first cut is made so they could rip out the kidneys and start frying it in a pan. And so they're the most highly prized parts of the animal. That's only, I think this is a consequence to the plant-based propagandist approach to nutrition that Canada is on the unfortunate leader in. And that research being literally driven by the blood and bones of Indigenous children in the first nutritional human research studies in residential schools throughout Canada. So there's an even bigger issue to solve, you know, when it comes to this our opportunity to utilize a whole animal. Yeah, it's distorted by what's presented to us at the grocery store and what's presented to us by dietetics. That needs to change. Every other part of the world, organs, brains, glands, everything, they're the most expensive, highly prized parts. And so I would limit that idea to just being in Canada and the US.
Yeah, I mean, like that is the extent of my exposure in terms of the food systems that I've been able to study in depth and, you know, actually take part in. So I hear what you're saying about um, you know, perspectives in other places in the world. Yeah. I don't know if I've got any other questions, Joe.
I have a question for you. Okay, so do you know, I mean, like, surely you must, the buffalo issue with early settlers, knowing that if they killed off the buffalo, they're killing off a major food source. And
Oh yeah, I've seen the photos, the Skull Mountains and all of that imagery.
do you know, just by chance, I've just had this idea like 3 minutes before our phone call, or this chat, to how much in on a per year basis, how much buffalo were killed. Because I think what I was able to come across really quickly is that one guy in one season had killed like 4,300 buffalo or something. And so I was just crunching some numbers and I was like, okay, so if one buddy in one season kills 4,300 buffalo, I think that was Buffalo Bill. And he, uh, yeah, so a buffalo is a lot bigger than a cow and is thus able to provide a lot more nutrition than a cow. Maybe a buffalo would be enough to subserve the full nutrient requirements for two people for an entire year. So if you take the 43 or 4,800 buffalo that were killed by this one guy in one season, that one season of buffalo would have been able to provide the nutritional and energy requirements of maybe close to 20,000 people, if I stretch the math even a little. And so if there are in this one small part of the United States, I wouldn't put it past the buffalo slaughter to be maybe harvesting a couple million buffalo in a calendar year, because I think in total there was over 40 million, I think was the estimate that I kind of came across. And that's one small part of the United States. I think if you're looking at our ability or maybe even responsibility to facilitate the market for regenerative agriculture meats, I think that that is going to be a really sustainable process for and that might actually uh, so in I know I'm not even really asking you anything now, but the food systems and food security experts that I've been meeting with, they're always incredibly valuable conversations. So, I mean, I thank you for this, but the one of the questions that was brought up to me, and it and though I didn't, apply any sort of rigor in researching this, but she was able to tell me confidently that there's not a food hunger and starvation issue in the world right now. There's enough food that is feeding everybody. It's the quality of that food that is driving disease, and then the costs associated with that disease being a contributing factor to not just environmental damage, but uh, to the, how do you say, poverty issues, I guess, one of the drivers behind that. And so kind of like always just taking all things into consideration, looking at the totality of all of the evidence. I know it's really easy to say that there's not enough animal product in this world to feed 9 billion people tomorrow. And that may be the case, but it also may not be the case. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Once again, I think it has a lot to do with the way that it's used. And like you mentioned, there's a lot of like a huge cultural piece that comes along with it in the way that people have been taught to think about animal products and like a balanced diet in quotes, I'm gonna say. But yeah, like, and you know what I mean? Like when I first saw your posts and stuff about it, like I literally have not been able to get it out of my head. Because I know that, like, you know what I mean? It's like, and it's more than the grain of truth in it, like like you said, the only reason that you ended up taking up this position so wholeheartedly is because you had tried for so long to poke holes in it and to find a reason why that wasn't actually the case. And that's why you ended up taking up this position. Um, yeah, and like, I don't know, I think when I think about eating a diet, like, how's your breath, Joe? Does your breath reek of ammonia? Because that is what somebody told me was an inherent consequence of adopting what they referred to as the Atkins diet, because
It,
that was a thing, right? Like,
Mhm. Yeah, it is. It would be. So Atkins and ketogenic diets, you're going to off gas. Your body is producing lots of ketones, and those ketones are broken down into their metabolites. The main one is acetone, and so which is nail polish remover, if you want to look at it that way. So a lot of people will get like quote unquote keto breath, but the carnivore diet, this way of eating exclusively animal products, is not ketogenic at all. Ketosis is your body is gonna die, and because there's no sugar, you've removed the sugar from your diet. It's so used to taking the sugar and using that for energy, you've removed that. And so in the interim, while you're switching from sugar to carbohydrates to fats, ketogenic ketosis, ketogenesis is what keeps you alive in the interim. Once the switch is made, and then also same thing, like when you start removing the amounts of fats, ketosis turns back on again. So in the case of a fast, ketones are produced. Yeah, no keto breath, no acetone, no nail polish remover coming out of my pores, because I eat enough protein to prevent that from happening. Ketogenesis is a sickness, that can be utilized in a form of as a form of therapy for very certain psychiatric conditions. But as looking at ketogenesis or Atkins, the ability to produce ketones, that's never a good thing. Your body doesn't see that as a good thing. Um, it's an emergency, and that's a consequence to that emergency. You could smell it and taste it. So no, I don't have no keto breath, because I do everything I can to avoid ketosis, which is just by eating protein, which keto heads avoid. But yeah.
They avoid protein?
Yeah, you have to keep your protein low to keep ketone production up. And the flaw in ketogenic and Atkins is the goal of it is they want fat loss, and the more ketones that you produce, the more fat that your body is burning. um, and yeah, as a short-term goal opportunity, it's really good. You decrease adiposity really fast, but you can't stay in that state forever. It's just designed to lose the weight, and throughout that process, yeah, you got to keep your protein super low. And on a carnivore, biologically appropriate way of eating, something that is specific to our species, we need a lot of protein. And so we keep our protein high, um, just as what was ancestrally done. Then, yeah, you're not going to be producing ketones. Maybe in your sleep a little bit, but every time I check my ketones, I'm like below 0.1 millimole. Sometimes they don't even register at all. It's a zero. It's a waste of money testing every time. $1.50.
Are those just like blood test strips, like a diet, like the same way you check your blood sugar, or what?
Yep. Yep. I got a device that can measure blood glucose and blood ketones. A lot of people have the pee on a stick or the breath meters, and those are all just nonsense. You got to check what's in your blood. That's what matters.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm trying to think of any other questions or anything that I have at this point, but do you have any other questions or comments or any other explanatory statements that you wanted to offer before we sign out?
No, I just I really appreciate it when people reach out and they want to have a chat. Like, I can't imagine having this in Facebook comments. Like, that would have been just terrible. My wrists would have.
Oh, that's why I didn't even bother commenting. I read your post. I read down the like 25 comments and like all the replies, and I just figured it was a conversation worth having. And my husband is like a papered chef, so when I mentioned it to him and was like talking to him about this idea, he's like, fuck that, it's bullshit. Like, I'm a cook, I cook things and I know that it's this way, and I'm like, I get it, like that's what you learned, and that's what you know, and that's what you're educated in. But yeah, I wanted to have this conversation because I knew there was something there, and it's just like, you know what I mean? As a gardener, it definitely kind of kills my inspiration. Like, fuck, why would I grow a head of broccoli, man? Like, why would I even try? What the fuck's the point of growing beans? You killed my fucking gardening inspiration, Joe. Christ. Like, what am I supposed to do this summer now?
Shit. Well, that wasn't my initial intention. But it's certainly a consequence that a lot of people are realizing.
I'm gonna do it anyways.
I know my buddy in Peterborough, he makes a garden every year. His parents have been big gardeners, and he's been like doing it right with me. And I mean, he's not as invested into the research components as I am, but he still grew a garden. But he just let it rot. He grew the whole garden because it's really fun watching everything grow. Like, I did that, but they didn't eat any of it. It just rotted.
Yeah, and like you know, I saw your comments regarding like somebody had talked about like somebody brought up monomen, and you'd mentioned that that was like evolutionarily a pretty recent thing that got introduced to the human diet. And I think you called it goose food. Good for the geese or something like that. But yeah, it's just like because there is so many things in like what would be considered a traditional diet for like almost every group, like on Turtle Island, with the exception of like Inuit, that and had some kind of agrarian system, or like what I mean, at least forage for these plant foods like odamin, for example. Like I just was eating a bowl of strawberries here while we were like having this chat. I'm like, fuck it, I like them, they taste good, and I'm gonna eat them anyways. Like it's just what I mean, like there's a lot of stuff that you are saying that would also be what I mean, contradictory to all of like these people who are touting traditional diets and traditional ways of knowing and being in terms of like food systems. So
Yeah.
um
Yeah, definitely rubs a lot of people the wrong way, especially when it is interpreted as, sometimes I'll just say it straight up to you, like because people are like, well, you're basically saying that beef is better than wild rice. Or even beef is better than moose or fish. And I guess in a way that is what I'm saying. Um, but yeah, some really hard ideas, and entering into the public space with these now has been it's been more fun than anything. Being able to spend time with folks like yourself, having conversations, I think are super valuable. And I think I'm really glad we were able to hit record. Maybe this is something that we would be able to share and other people would be able to benefit from.
yeah, I
I,
don't have a problem if you upload it on any of your on your pages or your YouTube channel or what have you.
yeah, I think, yeah, just more of these conversations need to happen, and because it's only through these conversations, I think that you can properly enter into the discourse and come to any uh, acceptable reality, I guess. Um, but yeah, I gotta bust into another meeting.
All right, well, thanks for the chat.
Yeah,
have
it was.
folks.
You know what? Yeah, anytime you want to hang out, I'll bust open a Zoom room anytime. If you have more questions, if you've read some things and want to run it by me, and
Oh yeah,
um,
I ask. You mentioned that you have a daughter in one of your Facebook posts. I am a mother of 3 girls. How old is your daughter?
she is 8.
My oldest is 9, so I was just thinking that they might
Friends.
yeah, you know what I mean. Kids are kids. Kids love other kids, so you know what I mean. Like, and I think that they could learn a lot from each other and have a good time hanging out. So
Totally. Oh my God. Yes.
we're up in the north end of the Sioux, but yeah, you said you're near Peterborough though, right? Like,
Yeah.
you're like way down here in southern Ontario at this point. Because I remember at the time, like I when you did your talk at Trent for Indigenous food systems, like I don't think you were living in the area at the time, were you? Or how long?
No, I've been here for a couple of years now. But when I did bunch of work at Trent, I wasn't. No, I probably wasn't living here. No.
Nice area though, right? I was
Yeah.
there for like 4 years at Trent, like the waterways and all that kind of stuff. It's awesome.
Totally. Yeah. It is. It really is.
If you're ever back and hit us up and we'll have a conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. For sure. That'd be great.
garden and tell us a bunch of bullshit. It is, Joe. Anyways, have an excellent day and enjoy the rest of your meetings.
You too. It was so good to chat. All right. We'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye.